Hello, everyone. My name is Jamie Zamora, and today we'll be talking about a couple of theories that we learn in class. The idea here is to kind of somewhat address certain questions and topics, challenge the theory a little bit, and obviously kind of go in, obviously in depth of what it particular relates to, somewhat of a gamification and perhaps, how it can be used and tweaked in some shape or form, obviously for the user. So Project One, Motivation and Ethics. That is the name of the project here that we're going to be talking about today. We are having somewhat of a breakdown of certain main topics that we're going to talk about today, which is what is the theory itself, how to apply the theory for behavioral modification, ethical concerns associated with the theory. So obviously, like I said, three theories that we're going to be covering, and this is going to be somewhat of the format that we're going to address each theory. So first theory that we have here is the Maslow hierarchy. What is the theory? Maslow had this triangle chart where it really kind of put in perspective what was important for society and obviously what, somewhat of the behavior was driven from the ground up. So if you really think about it, there's this pyramid that talks about, somewhat of the essentials and then goes more into more a religious or more of an emotional aspect. So the theory really kind of touched base on, the immediate needs, which, for you and I, it might be a house, a roof over our heads, food on the table, somewhat of the material aspects of, what makes you feel good. What do you need in order to somewhat maybe survive or, somewhat say that you made it. And then obviously towards the top of the pyramid, Maslow starts challenging the fact of, how connected you are with yourself, whether, do you follow a religious belief? Do you follow, somewhat of a belonging belief that, you have friends, are friends important, and kind of, shoot over to the peak, which is the ultimate namaste, if you may. So a couple of things that that the behavioral, how to apply this or how to modify it. I would say when I was looking at this theory itself, the market share kept coming up. So obviously if you talk to a younger crowd, they're going to be more on the belonging side. I would say more of the perhaps spiritual. A lot of the online gamings, a lot of the gaming itself. It's not fun if I'm not playing with my friends. It's not fun if it doesn't speak to me it knows me or I'm part of that clique. Where more of the older crowd would potentially challenge the fact that, hey, it's more about the more I have, maybe, as far as coins, as far as money, as far as ranking, could potentially be something where, we can dive into that particular sector. One of the things that kept coming up when I was looking at this particular theory was obviously, how to live life and what's needed to live the right life. And I think that, that is important to somewhat dive into because, some of the ethical concerns, associated with this theory would be, you might be doing too much of one part of the pyramid and not really, concentrating on the other one. So for example, if you are, if you have something where you're way too into in tune of religion and way too on the belonging aspect, you might forget to obviously, the roof on top of your head, the necessary things to obviously provide, food in the table. And obviously you need that, right, to survive. And on the contrary, you might focus too much on the things like, monetary or material and then forget why we even did it in the first place. So I think that this particular theory, in somewhat of a being able to modify it, being able to gamify it, really kind of puts in perspective of a good balance of, what is a good need, what are the necessary needs when obviously working through trying to convey a message or obviously try to convey an ultimate obviously I would say purpose, right? So if the purpose is for the game to teach the kid how to learn the colors, For example, the game should be, hey, maybe you can play with your friends. That sense of belonging. Maybe sharing your ranking with others, and maybe providing the feedback that the others provided to you, and obviously kind of carry that through that type of, I would say, structure. That's something that really came up to me when I was looking at this theory itself. And obviously, like, seeing the pyramid really speaks to you, where, things could, somewhat the foundation, but, where does the foundation stop, right? And then obviously, how important is that next two levels that obviously kind of full circle a concept, or the way of life. Then we talk about the second theory that we learned in class, which is the cognitive dissonance theory, which, this was interesting. I want to say that this is somewhat of a theory that comes up a lot I would say in the medical field, perhaps, or I wouldn't say in the medical field too much, but also like that example that really spoke to me when I was doing some research on was the smoking. The person that smokes, but and knows that it's unhealthy, but they still do the act anyways. So obviously, this theory talks about that contradictory within yourself, and what happens afterwards. So with that example, like I said, so you can do, I would say, two concepts, and have two different train of thoughts at the same time, which is obviously I know that smoking is bad, but I'm still smoking. So when the theory is challenged, obviously you got two things that you can do. You can either say, hey, I can continue to smoke, right? And I'm doing other healthy stuff, so maybe smoking is not that bad, and you kind of come to peace with that. Or you take the action of, hey, smoking is bad for you, I will stop smoking because of that. So there's that theory of contradictory, and I would say come to peace moment is really where the climax of the theory really kind of comes to fruition. The how to apply it, or theory behavior modification, would be just that, right? So for example, I think that, going back to the cigarette scenario, providing, it could be a game that every time you smoke, you were to record it, you would have somewhat of a information coming at you via maybe an application. And I'm just kind of thinking about it, where it would educate you on how bad that particular action is, and perhaps you really start overlaying the conflict, and more of a overpowering the bad that you're doing, and why you should stop it every time you smoke, right? So quick idea that when I was looking at this and when I was thinking about this, imagine imagine putting your cigarettes in a pack that was automated via Bluetooth to your phone, and every time that pack would open, you would have to click a button in your phone, and then it would only until you're done viewing that video of how bad it is to smoke, that cigarette pack would open, right? So that is something where I see maybe gamification or modification of the theory could come into play, and say, hey, understanding the fact that there's a contradictory scenario going on here, how can we manipulate that and maybe drive the behavior towards, something positive? The ethical concern about this associated with this theory, I would say that, obviously, what is right to you might not be right for everybody. And I think that, what that might be the concern. I would say, like, as a developer or as a game designer, you got to be careful. For example, that example that I put with the case that is automated with your app, and what if the person really is going through a tough time, and the way that they kind of escape is that, and maybe they need that in order to feel at peace before having perhaps a bad temper towards somebody else, and you got to take care of your user first. So I would say that's the only kind of somewhat what's right, what's wrong ethical concern about it that I saw in my particular scenario, and obviously kind of referencing gamification, and somewhat of modifying it. But obviously, you can always include and tweak somewhat of that scenario by understanding the scenario, and maybe say, hey, you get three free passes that day. Use them carefully, right? So not maybe, and then it becomes two passes, and then becomes down to one pass that you get to kind of make that call. So slowly um, deteriorate that addiction, if you may. So really interesting. Obviously applying this particular theories to gamification and understanding it, I think is very impactful. And then the last one, distribution theory, I think is one of a very unique theories, just because it had an internal concept and an external concept of it. So I would say like somewhat of an assuming factor based on an action that somebody's doing. So for example, somebody that might be at the bowling alley, and we can somewhat go into an internal description where, hey, the person is there because he likes bowling. That's why maybe he's there. Or versus an external view where, hey, he's there because his friends are there. And obviously he might hate it, but because his friends are there, he obviously enjoys that action. So I look at the attribution theory more of a somewhat of an assumption that we might see from somebody, and obviously being able to understand it from depending on the view that you're seeing it. So when I look at this from a behavior modification or even gamification, I see this more a maybe a task that that somebody will do if we implement an external view from the attribution, where like, hey, like if we show that a lot of people are doing this, the likelihood of that person going and do that task obviously could potentially increase. I know in class one of the examples that really spoke to me was for the person that that electric company that showed what your neighbor is doing, right? So like obviously saving electricity or consuming or trying to save electricity is a good concept as a whole, but are you going to do it just because it's good, or are you going to do it because other people are doing it? And obviously you have that idea and being able to tweak, right? The ethical concern here, or if there's any ethical concern here, is obviously I would say that it would just be using the comparison, or maybe not even comparison, but not having a good understanding of the action itself. So if I'm looking at it from an external attribution angle, am I assuming too much? Because for example, going back to the example where the guy is at the bowling alley, he's there because his friends are there and that's why he enjoys it, or does he truly want to be there and that's what he enjoys doing? I think maybe not understanding the user, not understanding the scenario itself could potentially, be conflictive, but nonetheless, it's a good concept or theory to understand when obviously trying to get somebody to do something, and understanding why they do it. So that is the attribution theory. So very interesting stuff, very easy to connect with when it comes down to gamification, and really at the end of the day, trying the user to do something in order to help them or educate them or correct something, and understanding these theories are super important. Once again, James and Moore, thank you so much for your time, and I hope you enjoy the video.